Good afternoon. And on behalf of all Dunn County government, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to come and speak with you today. I'm Dan Prestebak, the County Conservationist with Dunn County Land and Water. And I'm going to give you a little background on Dunn County and then an overview of some of the conservation programs that we have. And then KT Gallagher, our Public Health Director, will talk to you about a recent health needs assessment that was completed. And then Dunn County Land Conservation Committee member and board member Mike Kinnear will talk to you a little bit about realities of Dunn County government and funding. Start with, here's a picture of Lake Menomonie and a welcome slide. This here's an outline of Dunn County. We're located, and a lot of people just see Dunn County from the interstate, kind of traveling from east to west. We have a lot of outwash sandy soils along the eastern part of the county, following up the Red Cedar. As we get to the western side of the county, we have a driftless area, limestone overcapped with silt loam soils and very fertile valley bottoms. So we have a good variety of soils and geology. We're heavily influenced by corn. Jennie-O, Turkey, and Barron to the north of us is a big importer of corn. Ace Ethanol and Stanley. Northwest of Menomonie, where Menomonie is located where that star is, there, UW Stout. And Menomonie, Ace Ethanol is northwest of town. Produce about $11 million or 11 million gallons of ethanol per year. And then down in the lower right-hand corner of the county is Chippewa Valley Bean, one of the world's largest producers of dark red kidney beans. The beans are transported and sold throughout the world, basically. When we look at the county itself, we have 22 towns. 16 of those towns have adopted county zoning. In those 16 towns, we have livestock siting, where Land and Water Conservation works with new and expanding farms over 500 animal units to meet the state performance standards, including nutrient management, manure storage standards, and barnyard runoff control. We also have in our zoning ordinance a non-metallic mining overlay district that requires all frac sand mines and mines over 25 acres to meet certain standards, to be zoned into the non-metallic mining zone, and then their plan of operation needs to meet certain standards that contain water quality standards. And then in the western part we have the town of Lucas, in the northern part, town of Wilson, and in the northeastern part of the county we have 3 towns, Wilson, Lucas, and Grant, that have adopted farmland preservation zoning. And then the town of Grant has gone one step further in 2016 and created a ag enterprise area, and we've had just, I think, 4 farmers in that town sign long-term contracts and receive the extra protection for their farmland and the extra incentive of signing long-term contract. So I think one recommendation, I would like to see more farmland preservation zoning, because we get compliance with those performance standards. And the credits for farmland preservation are several years old. That might be an area, I know the previous speaker talked about Kewaunee County, 90% farmland preservation. We don't see that here. We have just 3 townships, but we do work diligently with those landowners to be in compliance with those performance standards. The next slide here is just some newspaper clippings or Googling the green water in Lake Menomonie, and this is what you find. Blue-green algae. It is severe, to say the least. And we have a lot of people asking for clean water. Fishable, swimmable, clean water. In 2015, the county went through a directional planning process and created an environmental policy statement. And in that process, we had evaluated 178 programs, I believe it was, and 72 of those aligned some part of the environmental policy. So when we look at water quality in the county, it stretches way beyond land and water conservation and public health. It is affected in several of our programs. Many of our programs have an effect on water quality. In Chapter 92, there's the land and water planning process. That is a requirement of each county, and we definitely embrace that process. I look forward to it. We just completed this plan in 2016-17. We had 49 people on an advisory committee to come in and give us input into that plan. We try to make everyone feel that they have a part in land and water resource management and a part in improving water quality. This is a list of our impaired waters. We're seeing that list grow. We have about 400 miles of impaired streams and waters in the county. So we do have, in addition to the green algae in Lakes Tanner and Menomonie, we do have a lot of our streams that are impaired also. This is a copy of the Transect survey. Each spring we drive this route and stop at 526 points and look outside the window on each side and look at the crop that's planted, whether it's residue is there, whether it was no-till, whether we feel there was a cover crop, and just to keep a gauge on, trends. And what we're seeing is we are seeing increases in no-till corn. We're seeing increases in no-till soybeans after corn. But one thing in the last 5 years we've seen is a big decrease in the conservation reserve. We had 20,000 acres in conservation reserve, and now that's down to about 4,000 acres. And we know that was on the highly erodible soils that are being row cropped, and where we're seeing slight increases then in corn and soybeans. One thing that's required in that land and water plan is a strategy for these NR 151 performances, or performance standards, and we definitely work with the farmland preservation people first, then the livestock siting participants, and followed by that would be farmers taking out a manure storage ordinance permit. Right now we only have the manure storage performance standards in, the only standards we have under ordinance are the manure storage standards. We have a draft ordinance that's been in front of the committee that would contain all the performance standards that we're considering implementing, but we have not done that at this time yet. Oh, what happened?
Broke it, Dan.
I broke it. Well, one of the projects that we really feel is worthwhile is the Red Cedar Demonstration Farm. And I know the next speakers are going to talk to you about the Red Cedar Conference. And I've attended all but one of those conferences in the last 8 years. And I've seen enough speakers right on that stage there that have convinced me that a healthy soil is the only way that we're going to clean up our water and protect our groundwater. And Dunn County has embraced this. We've adopted a healthy soil as the mechanism to clean up our water. And we started this 5 years ago with 150 acres of county and city land on the east side of Menomonie. For the previous 40 years, it had been rented to a local farmer for corn and soybeans. And we now rent to the Chippewa Valley Technical College. And the students are out there with instructors from soil testing in the spring to planting, to selecting herbicides and seed varieties, planting cover crops, planting no-till, and then all the way through harvest in the fall. And it's been a great learning experience for the students. It's been great for our land and water conservation staff. And we do have a couple strips in there where we have check strips, and I'll get to those in a minute. So when we look at a healthy soil, what we need to do is increase soil biodiversity. And we need 3 crops in the rotation. Corn and soybeans, we found out, are just not making it. We need corn, soybeans, and a small grain. And that's where I see a big help that the state could help us find a market for those small grains. We know that we can improve the health of our soil and our water quality if we can just find the small market. Now, CBTC has tried different things. The first year they planted oats for General Mills in Minneapolis to make oatmeal. The oats didn't get heavy enough. We're not far enough north to raise good oats for oatmeal and Cheerios. And this year they tried oats for a local cooperative, and we didn't have the best weed control in them, and they were rejected. So other things we need are continuous living root, which we get from cover crops, And then we need to minimize soil disturbance through no-till practices. So the good, we've increased soil biodiversity. We've seen in 2018 the first increase on our healthy soils over our check strips. We know that there's a lag. There's a risk for farmers to adopt soil health practices and soil health rotations. And we've seen, you know, a very good adoption of cover crops and even full season cover crops. We have about 6 to 8 farmers now in the county planting full season cover crops on some of their farm, because we can plant a mix of cover crops of 7 to 8 species, and it's just about like taking 7 or 8 years of cover crop and putting it all in one. The bad though is the market for the small grains, and then herbicides are limited if we're trying to plant cover crops, some hurdles that we've been working through with the students. I guess switching gears here, there's nowhere that we're asked for clean water more than the Red Cedar River because of our green lakes here in Lake Menomonie. So in 2012, the EPA and DNR approved the TMDL, which called for a 65% reduction in phosphorus coming into the water. And in 2014, the Red Cedar Partnership came together for 2 years, and in 2014 we had this plan approved to meet that 65% reduction. And we know that phosphorus is getting into that water in several different ways. It's coming off from farm fields. It's coming from lawns and yards. It's coming from city streets, from failing septic systems, from barnyards, and from eroding shorelines. Back 2006 and 2007, we did an inventory of the Red Cedar and the Hay River above Tainter Lake, and we found 58 eroding banks. We have in place now a couple programs to fix 2 of those. So there's a big need, and we know that, you know, the area, the water area of Tainter Lake is being displaced by sediment that's coming down from those banks. And we know there's a certain amount coming from point sources, but when we look at the TMDL, the point sources in the watershed have done a great job of reducing. And when we look at, you know, farm fields on top there, we know that it's not one farm or one field, but it's accumulation of all those farms. So what we've done there then is we went to the Department of Natural Resources, and we were successful in securing a lake protection grant that provided 2-year funding for a soil health specialist to create 2 more demonstration farms out in the watershed. We felt that landowners would learn better from their neighbors and create another farmer-led watershed council in that in the Dunn County portion of the Red Cedar. So when we look at the county, we have 2 of the farmer-led watersheds. Over on the western side is the Hay River farmer-led, and they were one of the pilot projects when we started back in 2014 that I believe led to the DATCAP program that we have today. But I think there's a lot of good things about farmer-leds, but when you look at this map of the county, you can see we're only looking at, you know, maybe 20 to 30% of Dunn County. So that leaves a big area of the county that are not eligible for experimenting with cover crops, experimenting with the things that farmers can come up with. We don't have incentives for them. So they're great where they're placed, but we need to somehow get those incentives out to other farmers too, because we have a lot of good farmers throughout the whole county. And when you look at the whole state on the right, you can see that's very disproportional to the amount of land that's out there. I'd just like to recognize a couple of families in the farmer-leds. Jeff Lake, hopefully he's going to come and speak with you this afternoon. He stepped up, and we've got a demonstration farm on his farm. We had a field day there earlier in August, and we had about 90 people show up. And one of my neighbors attended, and he said it was the best farmer field day he's ever been to. So I was real pleased with the way the Hay River farmers put that on. Bill Tristan and Jake O'Beyer down here on the right have opened up their farm in the town of Grant for another farmer-led demonstration farm within the Red Cedar Conservation Farm. There's watershed. Getting to groundwater. We haven't had staff or time to spend a lot of time on groundwater. We did enter the Tri-County Groundwater Level Monitoring Program with Chippewa and Eau Claire counties about 2 years ago, and we have 7 of these sending units that put a sensor down into the groundwater to see the level of it and back up and then up to the cloud, and we can monitor the water in 7 wells in Dunn County and about that same many in the 2 adjacent counties. We haven't seen a lot of fluctuation yet, which is good. We've got, what we found so far is a pretty stable groundwater level, and some of these are located in heavily irrigated outwash plains. So, but we want to continue to keep that going. And then this is just a map of where we see our highest nitrate levels down here in the southeastern part, the dark purple area of the county. We've got in one town there 24% of the wells above the nitrate standard. And we get over to the western part, the northern parts, and we haven't got as many. But we've created this map with the data that we had available. And we definitely need to do more groundwater testing and follow that up. But at this point, we just have not been able to do that. And the last slide I have is just as the Chancellor this morning mentioned the UW Stout Lakes RU's program, where they've been bringing students from all over the United States here for the last 6 years to study water quality in the Red Cedar. And this report here was commissioned by the county and the city of Menomonie to compile the first 4 years of data. And this reinforces, the data that the students have found has reinforced a lot of the things that we're doing in land and water conservation. Farmer networks, farmer-led watersheds. And the #1 recommendation out of this report is to have boots on the ground staff in land conservation, UW Extension, and RCS out working with farmers. So a couple considerations. I think the SEG money that we get for implementing nutrient management could be a little more flexible so that we could do innovative practices with it. Right now you can do cover crops or no-till, but only if it's part of a nutrient management plan. That money is definitely channeled very narrow. I'm not sure if that's administrative rule or data kept in our policy. I'm not sure, but it's very narrow. Producer-led watershed grants, I'd like to see them at least 2 years so we could count on getting staff dedicated and getting farmers organized. I think the 1-year grant is a very narrow window for doing that. And then additional resources for staff funding and for groundwater testing. So now I'll turn it over to KT.
Good afternoon. I really want to thank you guys for coming up here and really meeting the community where it's at, although some folks would argue Madison is a little difficult to get to, but not as difficult as parking on Stout's campus. So I appreciate you guys. I also want to acknowledge that we are well within our process, so we're really nearing that level of saturation where you're starting to hear the same themes over and over. I really appreciate you guys being here. I want you to lean in and really recognize the nuance that exists here in Dunn County. We are uniquely aware here in Dunn County that where you live impacts your health outcomes. We see that in our backyard with the lakes. We also see that in our groundwater. About 60% of our residents here in Dunn County get their drinking water from private wells. So that has a really big impact. And that's just the physical environment. We're not also talking about the social economic environment or the root causes of health and health equity, especially rural health equity. So all of those things involved to really sum up our 2019 Community Health Needs Assessment. When we talk to the community and say, what is your identified health priorities? We heard loud and clear that a healthy environment is an incredible push for our community members, that they recognize that as something that we need to address from a community and multifaceted discipline. So I wanted to share, you look at the list and everybody recognizes that mental health is an incredible health issue, a public health crisis. When we think about suicide attempts and completions, especially in our rural areas among our farming community, that's #1. #2, healthy environment. That's incredible. We don't have that same level of awareness in other areas of the community, so we really, or other areas of the state. We really need to lean into Dunn County and their adeptness to recognize that their health outcomes are really impacted by where we live. One of the things that I wanted to share is that when we looked at compiling this data, we asked 2 questions. We asked, are you negatively affected? And do you perceive this as a weakness? So in Dunn County, nearly 50% of folks that answered the question perceived this as a weakness in Dunn County. Additionally, 50% of our respondents were negatively affected by the environment here in Dunn County. That's significant. It's really significant. I wanted to share a quick bit of qualitative data or a quote from our survey. The red cedar is a major hazard in our community. It needs to be brought back to the way it used to be. The pollution and chemicals have to make it unsafe. So just recognizing that the qualitative data in this survey was heavily weighted towards water resources, both surface water and groundwater. I want to share a little bit about next steps. So the ad hoc groundwater committee, you guys have a handout. It is the executive summary and looks like this, and then also has some of the recommendations in the work plan. So it's really a strategic plan driven by our ad hoc committee, and it's what the community, a wide variety of folks from our community, including some of our producers, some of our community members, some of our county staff, as well as our supervisors, really put their head together to look at almost a strategic plan on how we move forward with some of those big, broad goals. I also want to share that because our number 2 priority was a healthy environment, we are really looking to put together Health Done Right. Yes, it is a play on words. A health coalition that really coalesces around those community-identified health issues so that we can help sing from the same songbook and really have a collective impact when it comes to these health-identified concerns and priorities. I want to talk a little bit about limitations, and you've heard this already. So I am a big fan of local solutions for local problems. When you look at the watershed, you will recognize that it is not confined by our county borders. It needs to be larger than that. So when we think about local solutions, I would really encourage you to make that a broader locality. And then also really thinking about resources. So you guys have also heard that as well. So we work together with our community partners, our health system partners, our other engaged citizens to really leverage the human resources in our community to address these large community identified health priorities. But people resources only go so far. And so I'd really encourage you to think about resources as a limitation. And then finally, incomplete data. Again, you have also heard about how we need the data to make informed decisions and evidence-based interventions. Right now, we have about 60% of our groundwater, or our community uses groundwater for drinking water. There is no requirement to test their well on any frequency. So they may have tested it when it was installed, if it was installed recently, or they may have never tested it in recent memory if their bank didn't require it or if their lender didn't require it. We do have free and no-cost testing for folks that have young children in the house or are pregnant, but that's really voluntary. And so there's no systematic well testing so that folks don't know their own risk when it comes to contaminants in their drinking water. Additionally, there is some DNR data, and we do appreciate that we are starting to see that as a resource, but it's hard to get data in and it's hard to get data out. So when we're looking at data, I have my data, Eau Claire County may have their data, and it's hard to get that data to talk in a meaningful way. And with that, I'm going to pass it over.
In general, from a county. The first two groups to testify were really a statewide thing, and I hope you can kind of connect that. I know you can connect that with what we're looking at right here in the county. It's clear that the state and counties have many shared, and we work together in so many ways. My 3.5 years on the county board, I haven't even begun to discover all the different things that the county does with the state and by itself. You know, today is an example of that. What might not be real clear is that the Dunn County Board has really been actively working towards solving our water problems. I participated in both of the studies that you see up here. Both drew from a diverse group of participants from across the county. The first one, livestock operations, you met one of the participants this morning when you toured his farm. I participated in both of these. And both studies made recommendations that could help lessen groundwater and surface water contamination. We've implemented some from the 2017 report, but it's slow going. It requires a lot of time, and that's what we're missing with that. Longer term, I want to point out again that the county has really tried to work on the solutions ourselves, but again, it has to be in cooperation with the state. We made in 2015 water a high priority. The water quality specialist position is a rare position in the state of Wisconsin. I know there's at least one other, but we worked together with the city to hire this person to really help guide us to work. We've come a long ways. We've done a whole lot of things. I'm so proud of the staff, the county, their commitment, and what they've done. But we've got a lot to go, a lot of ways to go. In the recent groundwater study, the ad hoc one that KT just referred to, every recommendation, or nearly every recommendation, said, well, this is a good recommendation, we can do it, but we're limited by lack of staff time. So staff time is really important. Face-to-face, not FaceTime or Facebook or anything, but face-to-face interaction between county staff and farmers and landowners is the foundation of what we do here at the county. And we need to make sure, I hope, that we can fully fund that staffing formula. So mine is more of a general thing, and you guys have supplied all the details, but when we have enough staff, if we can Chapter 92, if we can just have that fully funded, that would make a difference. That would put another set of boots in the ground that I've heard different members of the committee here talk about. That would help us out a great deal. There are many other things that we could talk about that people have mentioned already today in presentations, and it'll come later, but it just chose to mention this one because it's really the foundation of how the county can work, is that face-to-face. Thank you.
Thank you, and every hearing we go to, we ask county departments to come up, and we really appreciate what you do. I totally agree with the full funding for the county conservationist position. We've heard that all across the state. I think that's a personal priority of mine. We tried and we got it increased a little bit in the budget, and we have some more to do. So, but I want to thank you guys for all you do, and I want to go back to a statement you said about every area is different. And if you notice where we're going all over the state, 13 different areas we're holding hearings, and that is true. And I wish there was a one statewide solution for some of this, but as you know, there isn't. So, but I appreciate all you guys do and the respect that you have with farmers and regular farmers. Thank you. Representative Shanklin.
Thank you. I really appreciated your presentation, and thanks for sharing with us just the executive summary of what you're doing. It looks very multifaceted and ambitious, so congratulations and thanks for your work. It sounded like you believe, local control is really important, and I agree with you, but that the state needs to provide resources to help you implement your local solution. So I appreciated everyone mentioning the resource limitations. You may have heard the previous speaker discuss an idea regarding competitive grant funding for county conservationists, and I want to ask you how you would feel about that. Given, I don't know how much money that would be, but we don't even have all 3 positions of the state share funded right now. In fact, we don't even have the 2. So I want to see how you feel about that and how that would affect you.
So when we talk about competitive grants for the health department, you're looking at the grant writer. So just thinking about limitations in staffing, that's significant.
I'm not sure how to answer this question, but when I look at each county being individual, I look at that land and water planning process, and that gives us the freedom to really look what we need in the county. And I do feel that there are resource needs in every county. I'm not sure what you mean by the competitive grant process. I mean, every grant we write, I think we're competitive with.
I can explain. I think instead of, so like if we were to do more money for county conservationists, instead of everyone getting their state share, maybe some counties getting more than that for something.
Oh, well, okay. I definitely feel, like I said, there's resource needs in every county, and those counties that maybe don't need that aren't as competitive because their water's in good shape, they need to protect it and keep it that way. So it's, on the general, I'm a little opposed to that. I think that every county should be, I don't know if they need to be treated equal, but they should be somewhere in that pie.
Do you happen to know how long it's been since Wisconsin state government has funded all 3 positions for the state share based on the statute?
No, I don't.
I think it's been over a decade though, hasn't it? Probably since 2009, maybe before.
I might even before that.
I think so too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So thank you for that. I just wanted to hear from you. I've been asking the same question in every county we go.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're hearing from county cons who are saying, if I had 1 more staff, here's what I do. I do more field days. I do more education. I do more prevention. So I think it's important. Looking at your nitrate testing, so it looks like 1 corner of the county has over 20, I think you said 24%. Have you done source contamination testing? What's going on in that part of the county? What kind of prevention mechanisms you have? I'm just curious.
I think all of us could speak to that. Late in the 2019 budget process, the County Planning Resource and Development Committee tried to put $10,000 in the county budget so we could do some source testing in that area and some more nitrate testing, but that was, it didn't make the budget. So we have you have the new grant.
So we have a competitive grant that I wrote, and again, it just helped provide a minimum of funding to help us start to look at source contamination. But again, it's really targeted in that area. It's not comprehensive. The cost for source testing is significant. So when you look at nitrate testing, that'll run a homeowner $20 to $30 depending on where you're going. When you're looking at human-made chemicals or agricultural markers, you're looking at $200 each. So that $400 just doesn't go as far as the $40.
Thanks. The reason why I asked about source contamination testing is because we're hearing from more communities who, they may have gotten the baseline testing done and they may be able to afford to do it once every 5 or 10 years, depending on how lucky they are with their county budgets, which we all know are very strict and tough with levy limits, right? But, to get to that extra step of source contamination and figuring out exactly how much of it is agricultural versus septic and all, going through those tracers, I think is key for planning and prevention, right? So one of the conversations, and Chair Novak also mentioned this earlier, is like how could we help our counties as they explore this? Everywhere we've gone, people are at different levels of mapping, testing, source contamination testing, and then some are already working on models for planning and zoning decisions and all those great things that we need. So if we were to put forward a grant program do you think you'd apply by yourself? Are there other counties you could envision yourselves working with as you look at both phosphorus and nitrate? I think you're a little more unique in that not every county has both nitrate and phosphorus at the levels you have, where they're both serious health concerns, right?
So we have good partnerships within our health departments. And so there has been some regional conversation around a potential regional grant application to look at that, again, on more of a watershed basis.
Great, thank you. And that's what I was looking for, is like, you know, the more we can incentivize regional partnerships across watersheds, since counties are, with all due respect to the county supervisor, like artificial political boundaries, right? Like we're all very invested in our counties, but water knows no bounds, and I think that's kind of what we're looking at. So I appreciate you answering my questions and wish you the best of luck as you move forward with your ad hoc committee and all the good work you're doing. Thank you so much.
Representative Summerfield?
Well, thank you for your role, really what you've done for Dunn County. I know this has been a challenge for a long time. One first question is, with Chairman, one size doesn't fit all, but being one of your state representatives, and there'll be a couple of senators and a representative from this area, I would love if you guys could shoot emails, 3-4 ideas of, you know, if we had to pick 4 top things, you know, say like, this is good for Dunn County, you know, and look at least talking Chippewa County a little bit. So that's my one ask for you. The other thing is with going back to Dan, with the farmers. I know a few of the farmers you mentioned up in Granite, Township of Granite. Has overall the reception been good? And if the reception hasn't been well received, what can we do to work on that?
Well, I've always felt that the town of Grant is our most progressive town for preserving farmland in the county, and they've showed that with the AEA. And I think that's following through with the farmer-led council and, you know, the demonstration farm. There are still definitely some farmers that have not participated, and I'm not sure. Just like every farm is different, they probably have their reasons for not doing that. And one of the things that UW Stout has looked at in the research is non-operating landowners. You know, that's where we see a big opportunity to work with landowners that rent their land out. But I really don't know what to comment on farmers that haven't participated. I mean, I've heard from some of them. There's no doubt about that. They don't want the government looking over their shoulder. They still feel the farmer-led is the government. And we hear about the fellow with the dairy this morning that held up his big book on spreading plan. I mean, people that don't have to do that are reluctant to develop that spreading plan. I know that's the case in some cases. But we're seeing, you know, fewer and fewer dairy farmers and more cash farmers. And in the farmer-led, we've had real good participation, but we're only, you know, we're in the second year in that farmer-led now. They've just applied for their second DACAP grant for that. So.
Representative Kurtz?
Thank you very much. Dan, when was the first year the lake started getting the issues with it?
When is the first year?
Yeah, when did the lake start having the algae issue? I mean, I don't want that.
Oh, well, when I was in high school, I took swimming lessons in the lake. It was maybe a little green then, but I think that it's been happening for, you know, a long time. Yeah, I know. But that was in the 70s, yeah, early 70s, yeah. Mm-hmm.
At what point did the county have 20,000 acres of CO2?
Probably about 5 years ago.
What do you know what it is now?
About 4,000. 4,000.
4,000?
Mm-hmm. And we know with that TMDL, it'd take us a long time to eliminate that bloom, but if we could shorten it up on both ends, it would be a big plus by reducing that phosphorus.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And then Katie, I have a question for you if you don't mind. So 60% of the private wells in Dunn County, do you know how many wells have been tested, say, in the last year?
Not many. So we don't have a county lab, so a lot of times our private homeowners will actually take that to CTL or Colfax testing lab. And so we don't have access to their records, it's proprietary, and we have asked. So we have really no enumeration on folks that have privately tested their wells.
So if somebody comes to you and they say, I want you to test my well, is that something you can do?
It depends. So we can do that for pregnant women and folks with young children, and we will send that off to the State Lab of Hygiene for no-fee testing. We do have some resources in the region. Eau Claire City County Health Department has a lab, so there is a possibility for partnership there. But at this point, we don't test it on site.
So on that slide, I'd like to ask you had a slide, it had all, in the southern part of the county, you had a very high level of nitrates. How are you getting that? Is that testing?
So that's a great question. Thank you for that. So we do have data that's been collected over several years from the State Lab of Hygiene, also from, when we're talking about data, not necessarily speaking to one another. So some of it is State Lab, some of it is Eau Claire Lab, and some of it is they call it WHEEL, so the St. Stephen Point's Watershed Lab analysis, WEAL, I'm sorry. Water, yeah, and Stephen Point, UW Stephen Point. And so that is an aggregation of the data that we have from those three sources.
So I guess my question is that data over many years, or is it, hey, this is...
Yes, so it is a very long pool of data. In addition, the data that we don't have, so one of the good points that Mike, our supervisor, can hear, just pointed out is that the data that we can test time over time is our TNCs, or some of our transient non-community water wells. And so we take a test every year, and so we can track that over time, but it's very limited as far as the number of sites that we're testing with frequency and regularity.
So being a health director, which you are, correct? Do you feel comfortable with those? I mean, so right now, you say, yeah, that's where I, as a health director for Dunn County, feel comfortable with those levels that we're at in this town.
Thank you for the question. Is it a representative sample? Not nearly enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking back to the impaired waters slide that you guys had, I'm just wondering, to counties that are to the north, either Barron, Russ, whatever, do we have a similar map for that? Can we, because it's looking like, you know, the waters are coming into the county impaired. Can we tell where those are, where that problem is happening?
Well, when we look at this map, first thing you gotta realize, if a water body hasn't been sampled, it's not gonna show up there. But we're definitely seeing, you know, less impaired as we get closer to the headwaters. And I feel with land conservation, the programs that we've been put in, we've probably made more headway with water quality on those headwater streams because they have less drainage area coming into them. But I don't know if Barron County, you know, has a similar map like that, but they sure could be able to produce one, I would think.
Just comparing it back to some of the other presenters that we had earlier, that seemed like there was an awful lot of CAFOs up in Barron County, and so I'm wondering if that is a direct correlation between those, if that's just, you know.
I don't know if there's a correlation. I don't.
Thank you.
When you looked at that one map at the CAFOs that you saw, there were the Genio turkey barns that are treated under a separate permit. And, you know, for quite a few years that turkey litter was taken to Minnesota and burned, and now it's being land applied again. But it's a very valuable nutrient too for crop production.
Senator Miller?
Um, 8 years ago, the legislature passed legislation to allow townships to withdraw from countywide zoning. And Mr. Prestebak, at the beginning of your testimony, you indicated a number of towns in Dunn County have withdrawn from county zoning. In my experience, what that leads to is greater rural development with more septic systems, more private wells, and hence more opportunities for contaminated drinking water. What has been the experience in Dunn County in terms of rural development and that might have resulted from withdrawal from countywide zoning?
Okay, I believe that at least 5 of those towns have never adopted county zoning. So they didn't withdraw. They have never participated. I believe at the last comprehensive rewrite, we had 1 county that was in county zoning decided not to continue, which I believe towns get the opportunity every time there's a major rewrite of the zoning ordinance. You can't, the way those 6 towns that aren't participating are located in the county, I couldn't really draw any conclusions. One of them definitely has a lot of residential, but it's located between Menomonie and the city of Eau Claire. And that's where I think the highest residential is, and then 2 of them are in the far north and northeast corners of the county where residential development hasn't been isn't happening.
And my second last question is Dunn County located in the Central Sands region?
No.
All right.
And we have some soils that are somewhat similar, but I think we have a heavier sandy loam soil than what you call in the Central Sands.
The reason I ask is because you indicated that your water level monitoring wells has stayed fairly consistent over time, which has not been the experience in the Central Sands region, and I didn't quite know where the boundary for that region was and whether or not your county was located.
Okay, we're not in there. And we've had those levels in for 3 years now, so we don't have a lot of data on them yet. You know, we may see some fluctuations. Now this summer, boy, we've had, you know, plenty of moisture, and we haven't seen any fluctuation.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.